What's up, y'all? I'm Oteil.
And I'm Mike, and we are on Patreon.
Get on the bus, you guys. Get your bus pass. We put out an additional episode every week where we answer questions from you, or sometimes we may just get off on a tangent about something important or cool that happened that day or a couple days ago.
Yeah, it's Oteil and I catching up, and you are invited. So if you head to patreon.com/comesatimepod, you can join us. You can get the bus pass. We have some incredible merch coming soon. We've got a lot of great surprises. So we would love to have you guys head on over.
Yes, most of all, we want to connect with you. So get on the bus, y'all. Welcome back to Comes the Time. How about that one, huh, Mike?
That was amazing. Oh man, we had Don Was on the program today, and man, what a way to start the new year, huh? Jennifer and then Don. Whew.
Yeah, we had a great, just like free-flowing conversation. His history is just amazing, man, and I see why he's so successful. You know, he has the right attitude and the right personality type for just the kind of life that he's had. I really can't wait for people to hear this one.
Yeah, this is I needed this one today for sure. He had a lot of real sage advice. Absolutely. And he's just so humble and so talented and multifaceted. Just really amazing individual, and I hope you guys all enjoy it. And it's a new year, and Oteil and I are very grateful that you guys rode out the second half of 2020 with us, and you're with us for round 2 of this new world we're living in. So thanks for being here with us. You could join us on Patreon at patreon.com/comesatimepod. We have a special new episode each week for you guys over there. And as always, check out all the amazing podcasts from our brothers and sisters at Osiris at osirispod.com. So enjoy. Happy New Year, and we'll catch you next week.
Welcome, Don. It's good to see you, brother.
Yeah, you too, man. How you been? Happy New Year.
I've been good. I've not. Happy New Year to you too. Me and Mike were both super psyched to have you on.
That's a thrill to be here. Thank you, man.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been a little bit busier than us of late.
It can happen. You know, I mean, I don't know if it's nice, but one positive aspect of being locked down is that a lot of people are making records. That's about the one thing you can do. Been busy recording.
That kind of seems like a theme with everyone that we've had on, whether comedy or music, is just to adapt and react as best as possible and put out content.
That's it. Yeah, you find your avenue of expression that is safe and floor it. Yeah.
I like that.
You seem like you've got a pretty cool space there that you're hanging out in right now. It looks very tranquil and complementary to some creative juices flowing.
Yeah, no, I like this room here. Yeah, this is just in the house. I've had worse rooms to sit in my life, for sure.
Yeah, we want to get into some of that, actually. You know, we have a lot of it's like a mental health through that goes through the show, and so we like to talk about the downs as well as the ups. I like the triumph, you know, coming back from being down, especially watching so many people not make it back up. But, you know, I have like Detroit stuff that I want to ask you because I know you're from Detroit. And I'm, you know, of course, being a bass player, I'm like, did you ever meet Jamerson? You know,
I wish, man. I don't think people fully, when he was active in Detroit, I'm not sure that everybody knew who he was. You know, he got recognition probably after he died, really, you know. And I mean, we're certainly aware of how great those bass lines were from even being a teenager. You know, you knew that something extraordinary was going on there. But I don't think the full story of James Jamerson, I'm not sure it's ever been properly told, right? You know, Pino just sent me a couple of articles that he found about him. You know, Pino's another Jameson freak, and there were some new wrinkles. I know a lot of people in Detroit who knew him, you know, and I've asked about him, but he's a pretty enigmatic character, and just an absolute genius, man. I don't know how he did that. I don't know how he came up with that approach to the instrument. It's like, you know, if you listen to like Robert Johnson, he's playing bass, he's playing rhythm guitar, and he's playing lead all at once. So I think that's why they had to start rock and roll bands, because one person couldn't do all that stuff, you know? And same with James, man. He's playing lead harmonic line. He's playing, you know, percussion, and he's playing bass. It's really awesome what he does.
Yeah, for our fans that might not know who we're talking about, sorry about that. We're talking about the legendary James Jamerson that played, you've heard him on many Motown songs. He was the main guy at Motown, and I knew him for electric bass, but I didn't realize till much later that he played upright too and was doing like jazz gigs. I think there was some tribute to Jamerson that was like all these different cats contributed to, and I think like played bass lines of his that their favorite Jamerson bass line. And, you know, I kind of learned, he might have moved to LA before he even got to then he moved to the West Coast sometime later on.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite? What's your favorite James Jamerson line?
It's so hard. I've used so many of them. Like with Dead and Company, I'm on Eyes of the World. I'm kind of playing What's Going On.
I agree, man.
Know?
That's what that song is. I agree 100%. That's yeah. Yeah, me too.
A friend of mine named David Brendel told me that he's just one of these guys that goes down the rabbit hole. He knows more about music than I do by a long shot. But he said that song was actually inspired by a tune called Tighten Up by Archie Bell and the Drells.
No, that's Soulful Strut. Tighten Up is, yeah, hey, we're Archie Bell and the Drells, and now do the tighten up. Come on. Yeah, right. Yeah.
The chord change is different, but the bass line is really close. And I was like, but it and What's Going On have that same kind of thing. But I'm just fascinated with the whole Detroit thing because of, you know, Motown and all that stuff is, you know.
Well, I have a few theories about it. I knew a lot of the guys. I played in the band with Pistol Allen in the 70s. I got to know him pretty well and got to play with him a lot. Robert White, I played with in Detroit in the 70s. Dennis Coffey, I still play. I still jam with him, man. He came along a little later. Did you ever play the game of Operator? You know, where people sit around a table and they whisper something into someone's ear, and then it goes around the table.
Yeah.
And by the time it gets back, it's completely different to where it started. And I think music's kind of like that too. If you think of New York and LA as being certainly the music centers in the 1960s, there's something about coming from the provinces that by the time it got out there, it's like it got changed a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And in Detroit, the group of musicians Berry Gordy put together were primarily local jazz musicians. So I think they were trying to imitate New York R&B and just got it wrong, Detroit style. Detroit was a crazy place. I grew up there in the 50s and the 60s, and people, not just from all over the country, but from all over the world, came there looking for work after World War II. The auto plants were booming, and they all brought their cultures with them. And there's a real jambalaya of music. You know, there's everything. And when you started putting those you couldn't avoid the influences, you know. So even if you were a jazz musician, you heard country music. you couldn't avoid it being there. Even if you were a rock and roll musician, you heard polkas. You know, it's just everything was there. So there's this thriving jazz scene. I mean, incredible jazz scene. So at Blue Note, there's a really inordinate number of Detroit musicians who recorded for the label over the last 60 years. And so great jazz scene, great blues scene, probably best epitomized by John Lee Hooker. Great rock and roll, certainly in the 60s, MC5, Stooges on. So you put all that together, you kind of come up with something a little bit different. And I think the guys at Motown were imitating records, and I don't necessarily want to say getting it wrong, but putting their own thumbprint on it, you know, and they came up with something real crazy. And Motown music, it's so distinctive, you know. It's one of those rare things, like maybe Stax is like that, maybe Chess Records is like that, where the minute you put on the record, you may not know who the artist is going to be, but you recognize the sound and the players immediately. You can identify it.
Did you grow up glued to the radio, or was it hanging out at the record store, or?
All the above, man. You know, radio was super important. You know, I used to sleep with a little transistor radio under my pillow in the 60s. And that's why I don't mind listening to music on this. To me, this is just
it's a new radio.
Transistor radio, yeah. Sometimes, in fact, if I'm feeling homesick for Detroit, you can go online and you can find like 1960s Detroit Tiger games where like Al Kaline is playing. I'll go outside and barbecue, and I'll hang this from a tree or something, and it sounds just like I'm back. Yeah.
Tape an antenna, tape a wire hanger to the phone. I had a fun trip across country, doing stand-up comedy, which ended at Mark Ridley's in Royal Oak.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in town, I went to the Joe Louis to see the Red Wings play. Yeah. And man, what a cool place, like going back to like an old arena like that with the steps that are so small, and there's like one ATM in the entire place, and it's those old trough style bathrooms and stuff. It was really fun to go back to like the throwback venues and just think about some of the sporting events and concerts and stuff that, I'm sure as a kid you must have been there all the time.
I'm so old that Joe Louis is like a newer arena to me. Next door was a place called Cobo Hall.
Yes, that's right. I have dead tapes from Cobo Hall.
Yeah. Well, I saw the Stones there in 65 and 66. I saw the Dave Clark 5 there. I saw the Beatles didn't play there. Beatles played Olympia Stadium, which is the old hockey stadium. And the Detroit Pistons used to play in there. And if you look at it, it's still standing. They use it as a big church today, I think. But
wow,
it's funky, But it was great. It sounded terrible, man. The show sounded terrible. They didn't have monitors back then. The first two times I saw the Rolling Stones, there were Shure Vocal Masters on the stage, and nothing was aimed at the singers.
Wow.
I remember
just an echoey mess, man.
My old mentor, Colonel Bruce, he told me about when monitors happened. It's like Yorma when he's talking about when tour buses happened. I was like, wow, you guys were touring when there was no tour buses, right? So Colonel Bruce said, they put another PA on stage and faced it at us. He couldn't believe it. And he hated it because he said it was responsible for everything getting so much louder. Like it didn't really clear things up. It just made everything louder.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. Yeah, Stones talk about it a lot. They couldn't really hear themselves till 1969, 1970. You just heard girls screaming. They said it's just chaos.
That's right. They couldn't hear themselves like at all over the screaming, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you're
that's
just
like when I chatted with Ken Kesey, he told me about going to see the Beatles with they took the bus. The guys from the Dead went, Bobby went, all of them, and he said that they were so taken aback by the minute the Beatles hit the stage, everyone just started cramming towards the stage, and you couldn't hear the band. You just heard girls screaming, and the guys in the Dead were like, "We don't want this."
Whoa.
We don't want this. They're like, we just want to find a big place where everybody could just spread out and move back, take a step back, and have a good time, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
That must have been wild to see the Stones back then at an awful sounding venue with no PA.
Yeah, it's crazy. But they were charismatic as anything. I remember them as really great shows. But I remember that, yeah, this is with Brian Jones. You know, first 2 times I saw him, Brian Jones playing guitar. First 3 times I saw him. But in '69, when they got some monitors and they did that "Gimme Shelter" tour, they were badass, man. By the time they got to Detroit, that was, I'd never seen anything like that.
Is that one of those moments, like working with them, that I don't get starstruck that easily, but there's just sometimes when you like or go back and talk to your 15-year-old self for a minute. For me, you know, when I was recording with Herbie and watching my older brother and Herbie sit together on a bench and talk, I was just like, dude, for real, you know, was the Stones like that for you, or had you done?
It still is, man. I'll tell you a story. Awesome. This just happened to me. I was in Detroit, probably in September. I was there, and so I drove back into my old neighborhood, and I was sitting out front of the apartment I grew up in, and I flashed on the first time, you know, when I got my driver's license, the first time I took the car out. And I remember I got, you know, my parents had a Mustang. It would have been 1968. And I turned on the radio, and it was the first time I heard "Hey Jude." Whenever I hear "Hey Jude," I think of that incredible freedom of getting in the car and being able to go anywhere and being alone behind the wheel. So I thought, well, shit, man, I'm gonna turn the radio on. There's an oldies station there, and let's see what happens. Right. So I'm sitting in the same spot where I drove the car for the first time, and what came out? Jumpin' Jack Flash came out by the Stones. So I thought, all right, perfect, man. I'm gonna drive, and I started driving through the neighborhood, and I got about 100 feet, and I got a text from Mick Jagger.
Holy shit!
And I thought, oh my God, man, that's just. If my 15-year-old self, 16-year-old self could have seen that, it would be unthinkable. And it was really one of the most significant moments of my life. Like everything came full circle, and I was like, all right, this is good.
Not only would you have to explain that to your 15-year-old self, but you'd also have to explain text messages to your 15-year-old. You're like, you know the radio under your pillow? Well, that's going to be a phone soon, and Mick Jagger's going to send you a message.
Yeah, that's crazy. There's still, I've been working with them almost 30 years now, but there's still 1 or 2 moments in the course of each session where I look around the room and I just can't believe I'm in the room with them. You never become inured to it.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that, because I feel like some people do. And sometimes working with your heroes can turn bad, you know, it could be a real letdown too. So yeah. I'm glad for that though, because those are my favorite stories, some of my favorite stories on the podcast, where I know I've had them where if I could tell my 15-year-old self, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have convinced me of it. You know, he'd be like, yes, first of all, there's Star Trek communicators, and, you know, like you're going to get texted by, like, you know, your heroes. So
I probably would have, cool. My 15-year-old self would have sabotaged it. I would have ruined it somehow. I don't want that guy knowing anything.
My 30-year-old self was trying to sabotage it. You know?
Well, I could tell you this, man. Having like your wildest dreams come true, it's both. It can be both gratifying and a little fucked up too. I remember probably one of the darkest periods of my life began when I won a Grammy for being producer of the year. Not that was something. I didn't have it like pasted on the mirror in the bathroom every day. You're gonna win this. I wasn't. It wasn't the goal post. I wasn't driving towards it, but you're aware of it, and certainly, I remember. I remember winning it, and my real feeling at the moment was being relieved that I didn't have to finesse losing. I didn't want to go to a party and have people say, "Well, you were robbed. I voted for you." So it was like a kind of relief. But I mean, you've heard it said a million times, that if you feel there's something missing inside of you, if you're not feeling whole, and you think that some measure of success, whatever your definition of success is going to be, is going to fill that hole, it's always it's always a shock when it doesn't, when you still feel like the same shithead no matter what. And so I went through that. I definitely skidded a bit in my 40s, but you get back.
Straighten that wheel. You straighten the wheel out. The thing that I'm so inspired by you is how the vast array of artists that you've worked with. I mean, it's not like you stayed in one particular genre. I mean, you take the B-52s and the Rolling Stones. I mean, that's pretty different, but both phenomenal successes. I mean, did you? I'm always fascinated by that when you listen to like who produces an album or who, like, do you take time to like, do you have like a courtship process before, or is there kind of like, it's just got to be you have to be such a chameleon.
Kind of, but then it's not that different to jump from. I've done more extreme, like go from Wayne Shorter to the Stones, or from Wayne Shorter to Neil Diamond, which I did in 1 year, right? Okay, and it might be the way I approach producing records, which is I'm not an auteur producer. If you're looking for me to give you a sound, I want that hit sound. I don't do that. What I enjoy doing is getting inside an artist's head, figuring out what they want to do, and helping them achieve that. So the methodology doesn't change that much from artist to artist. You're still paying attention to what they're going for and helping them realize it. The different things, you do something different every time, maybe even every day on the record, your gig changes, but it's ultimately the same goal. And if you understand I hate to use a word like the process, it sounds so formal, but if you understand the process of making records, it doesn't, the style of music doesn't matter. What matters is that whoever the artist is, that they're being for real, that they're opening up and letting out this part of their inner life that defies explanation, where words fail to convey the true depth of our inner emotional lives, we use art as metaphor to communicate it. And that's the same. It doesn't matter what modes or scales you're playing or anything like that. That's just, or even, like textures that get assigned, like you assign genres to musical textures. I remember when we did Nick of Time with Bonnie Raitt, I got a call from a promo guy working on it from the record company. And he said, man, if you can just take the pedal steel guitar out of that song, I could get that on AC radio. And I was like, really, man? It's just a sound. How can that frequency response prevent a song from being emotional? But it does. There's certain connotations go along with the pedal steel guitar, particularly at that period of time. And we didn't take it out. and the record did all right. but point being, the textures are just textures. It's really about the storytelling, even if there are no words, even if it's John Coltrane, he's telling a story. Charlie Parker talked about that, being a storyteller.
I always think about that, just that folk aspect of music. That's what took me the longest to get. I think I was such an instrumentalist. You know what I mean? Like, it was about the instrument, then it's about music, then it's about, and it's like, of just what about what your story is, or even what happened that day, and all the greats have it. There's still, whether it's Art Tatum or Bird or whatever, there's still that element, that human element that everybody can relate to, you know?
Yeah.
That's
I think
amazing.
that's the beauty of the Grateful Dead,
It really is. It really is. I mean, just start with those, with those lyrics. That was a big thing to discover, going out and playing those songs in front of people, and seeing how they react to certain lines, and then really, that was one of the things Bobby, when I started playing with him, he was like, don't play the chords, learn the lyrics, learn what these songs are about, and play to the storytelling, and more importantly, stay the fuck out of my way when I'm telling the story. Yeah, cool. So I play the lyric, I play the song, I play the story, and I'm also cognizant of like that I'm accompanying the story, and I'm not the storyteller. Like my job in Wolf Brothers is to give Bobby the room. It's very different from what you do. Which you have a really hard gig, Oteil, because you have to. Phil is such a unique, charismatic, brilliant bass player, but it's so personalized. And yet, if you don't get that sound, when Mayer auditioned, I went up there and played bass, right? Before you were involved, and I don't know what Phil's doing, man. I don't know how to play like that. I wish I did, but I can't. I really, it's just so uniquely him. But when I played with him, I made him sound like a bar band, like a cover band. It was all the original guys, But you got it. So you do an incredible job of capturing that thing, but also also like being the bass player and holding it down and keeping a groove going, and playing with taste, man. I love listening to you. It reminds me, Daryl Jones is the same thing with the Stones. Bill Wyman, very, very linear player, but those you got to play those lines, man. If you don't play those lines, you're missing so much of those things. So Daryl, who's a low end guy, he found a way to be himself, and yet to incorporate the most important melodic lines from Bill Wyman's bass parts. And you've done the same thing. You have to be able, you can't play karaoke bass there. You got to be in it every night, and you can only do that if it's coming from within you. But I'm really blown away by how well you've assimilated into that music and cover both bases.
I appreciate it, man. It's hard for sure. Yeah, I feel like I do the same thing. Like I make it sound more like a bar band, but not. It's just with Phil. It's more amorphous. So from Phil stuff, there are not a whole lot of like bass lines to like stick to. He just has a way that he weaves.
Yeah.
And and actually James Jamerson is what I access for that, because James didn't just play a repetitive bass line all the time. He would just like weave, and I guess it was his jazz influence, you know? And, but it's way more difficult with Phil. And so I just was like, okay, I'm going to try to play that way where it's moving. But then when there's times where if the groove makes me want to play like the way I would play it, I just lean into it hard. And that's where I think, oh, this sounds like the cover band version. But people respond to it because it's like kind of a new thing for doing it that way, you know. So I can get away with it as long as I suspend it too. But it's been really a challenge.
But that's what keeps it fun, man, from show to show. You go out there every night, it's brand new.
Yeah, you can't say, if you're bored playing it, it's totally your fault. Because, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, and I know that I shouldn't to begin with. So that's the foundation, is that it could just like, you're living right where you know there's going to be an earthquake or the sand's just going to shift to the left or whatever, you know, like, I love it, you know.
Well, one thing you can be sure of is that whatever you played on the song the last time you played it, it's definitely not going to be that. Don't go back to that. That will not work again. You know, you just have to go into each thing open minded. I don't know how much Mickey and Bill change what they're doing night to night, but Jay Lane he'll play something different on the bass drum every time. So I start there, you know, like, well, what's tonight's groove? But I know that whatever we play, if you try to go back to the part you played before, you're doomed, and you just gotta forget it, which takes half the song, and then
that's why
then you're getting in the way.
Yeah.
Oteil, you sound amazing today.
You know, this soothing, all-natural spray was created and tested by singers for singers and other folks who use their voice. It's packed with organic, globally sourced ingredients that work to heal your throat. There's no added chemicals, no numbing effects, no side effects at all. Just pure relief within 12 hours. And bonus, it tastes great.
What's it called?
It's called Clier 37. Clier's Throat 37. Man, let me tell you, just a few sprays stimulates fluid circulation, fights inflammation, and coats your throat. The result is fast, long-term relief that allows you to keep on going through back-to-back recording sessions.
Like we do here at the Comes a Time podcast.
That's right. And now comes a time listeners get 10% off Throat 37 at Clier.com/Throat37 with promo code TIME. That's Clier, CLYOR.com/Throat37, promo code TIME.
Well, it's funny when you bring up Phil, too, because it's like Garcia. It's not like Phil auditioned for the Grateful Dead as a bass player. Jerry went up to him and said, I want you to play bass in my band. Like, that's when Phil started playing. So it's very similar to the way that Bobby's like, just play the story. You know, you listen deep into some of those, 25, 26 minutes into a play-in from like the early 70s. And it's like, Phil is just like, they're all on his back and they're riding him and trusting and it's going to strange places. And then it is so unique. But then you do think about it that like, he wasn't like your classic bass player joining a rock and roll band.
No, he wasn't.
That weird mad scientist conductor mind.
It's like it's the John Entwistle approach. I guess guitar players, right? I mean, it's guitar players playing bass. But if you listen like to Jerry's solo bands, John, who played bass with him, he was a pocket guy. Hang on a second.
Tell Mick we said hi.
There we are. We're back.
God's Keith Richards. No big deal.
So I think there's a lot of that, I guess, because, Barry Oakley with the Allman Brothers was that same way.
Yeah.
Really unusual style because of being a guitar player. But I think the whole, I love going back and just randomly. I have old Grateful Dead stuff come up randomly, so it just bounces through different eras. And it never ceases to amaze me how different they will approach something. Like, I don't know if they kept doing it that way or if it's like, wow, I never heard them do it that way before, It's just...
Well, it's liberating to come into it because there's really no bass part to imitate. There's not, you're free every night. It's a tremendous freedom that comes along with it. But it's
also
great. I mean, I love, I don't know if you find this at all, but I find myself missing the actual songs. Like I heard Lost Sailor the other night, and I thought, oh man, it's like an old friend I haven't seen, and I missed that sequence of chords and what you can do moving through it. I remember when he sent it to me, I didn't know that song. Sent me that and Saint of Circumstance, and I was like mad at Saint of Circumstance. I thought, like, why is this so complicated? It's so unnecessary. And it's hard to learn, but once you learn it, there's just so much fun to play. Those songs are more fun to play than any songs I've ever played in my life. I can't even explain why. They just melt under your fingers or something, man. It's a weird thing. I don't know, but you get a sensation from playing those songs, and they become like friends. Do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the architecture of it, like. Because I found the exact same things. Like some things I would be like, okay, you did this just because you wanted to trip yourself up or not. Like, you just made it deliberately harder. Like even like a super simple song with super simple changes, but this time it's this way. This time it's that way. This time, like Box of Rain, like really hard. You're like, come on, but then like you say, once you internalize it. And then for me now also, is I'm starting to think that the lyrics are a form of oracle because they hit you at a certain time in your life. Like, oh, that lyric was meant for this moment in my life for me to take it that way now, whether it was meant that way. It's like the weirdest. I woke up dreaming about Terrapin and it just hit me. I was like, this is like an oracle. Have you ever had that? Like, I was... dosed. I think it was at Fenway. And somebody gave me a lot more than what I was expecting. I usually just micro, and there's a story behind it, but it ended up, I didn't realize it, but it was like, whoa, and Dark Star happened. And I had a religious experience because the lyrics and the moment and everything that I was going through at that second, I was like, oh my God. But now it can happen to me without that. Like it's such a multi-layered thing. The Grateful Dead, it's something, man. But I really think it's about learning those songs. And I even told my nephew recently, in the last couple of days, I was like, learn Lost Sailor. I was like, learn Lost Sailor, Sailor Saint, and you're gonna realize something. Very profound.
Yeah.
Weather Report Suite was like that for me. When I came across this YouTube of Bob, I think he was still a teenager. Weather Report's really on. It didn't have any lyrics. And so he was doing like Joni Mitchell. I thought, oh, he's writing the song to the lyrics, and that's why the song is like, he had a whole melody. And they fit the lyrics and him being so young, and it's just him on acoustic guitar and humming this, and it's the beauty. It's just profound. It's like, how did you nail something timeless like that at that age? It just, there's so many layers to them, man.
Yeah. I have some old tapes of like in between songs, like after like a Beat It On Down the Line or something, he would start playing that. It'd almost be like almost like an exercise that it became to him, and way before there were lyrics. So it's like the Grateful Dead's like a magic eye puzzle, you know, where like when you finally see it, you're like, oh my God, it's been beautiful all along, but now I really see the depth.
Yeah.
And like you said, and it's like books, like certain books, like the Four Agreements or On the Road, or certain things that you can read at different points in your life, and it means something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same words and it's got the same magnitude, but it just means something to a different part of your soul or your heart or whatever, you know?
Yep.
And you're like, oh man, it's like an old friend. Like an old friend stays there for your different, you know, phases.
Yeah, that's really true. And it's a measure of good poetry too, that the lyrics are impressionistic enough that everyone can hang their own inner lives on it. It means something different to everybody. I think that's why Bob Dylan's such a great writer. I think the Stones write really great lyrics like that you can't quite pin down. It's the stuff, you know, I called my girlfriend, but she was out buying shoes. That's like so specific. I don't know that song. You know, if you get too specific, then there's no room for the listener in the song. And the great songs, the listeners are almost the co-writers. You know, they bring something to it and attach it of an ultimate significance to lines, and it'd be different. I see it out in the audience at the Bob, you know, with the Wolf Brothers shows. You know, that you can see different people respond to different lines, and then you can see everybody respond to their like key moments. That really blew my mind when they start singing along. All of a sudden, it's something when I didn't realize that. They scared me a couple times. All of a sudden, everybody's singing in the place. The audience is a really important part of that too. I've experienced that more than any other. Sorry. Can you hear that? Is that?
It's like my house with the kids.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, the audience is such a significant part of that whole show. You know, that I've never experienced it to that degree, where everybody's feeding everybody and everyone elevates together. That's a pretty incredible thing. They're like the audience is like an extra person in the band.
I've had to come to terms with the fact that I'm never going to know this stuff as well as most of the fans.
Yeah.
But it's really great too, because I have everybody as a resource. Like a perfect stranger that I met on a plane is a resource for me to learn something crucial about the band.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like for our lighting guy, Chris Reagan. I didn't know in the other one that there's this, you know, the bass bomb is supposed to come, and it's like this legendary thing. So I'm missing it, and of course nobody told me. You know, we played it like five times.
I actually don't know about it. What is the bass bomb?
It's just
in the
this
other
part.
one.
Yeah, it's just this part where I learned about it because I saw Chris Reagan's notes, or maybe he emailed me like he had made notes, and one of them was like, tell O'Teal about the bass bombs. And I was like, what is this about the bass bombs? He's like, oh yeah, dude. And the other one, you're the one that starts it in the beginning jam. It's just kind of going. And I do an ape, you know, it's just like, do 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 wah. And the sound man actually does this. He pushes a button that increases the low end to where it's like, you know, unbelievable. And so the first time I did it, the crowd was like, finally. Yeah.
Man. I gotta, yeah, no, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
There's always another thing. And so I just love talking to Deadheads because the audience is such, but I'll never know it as much as they did. I mean, you know, somebody that's seen like 300 shows or plus, you know, how am I ever I never, I could just spend nothing but Grateful Dead for the rest of my life and still not know, you know. But I just stay open because I'm like, people tell me, man, I really wish, or you know, and I take notes. I really do. You know what I can do, I do. I never see anything like it, you know.
Had you seen him a lot before you played in Dead and Company? One time. Yeah.
One time. That's because John Popper put us on the guest list, and it was at they were in Vegas. It was so hot, and I'm sure I've told this story on the podcast before, but I haven't told it to you though, Don. But we were there, and I really. I think Jerry was in pretty bad shape then, but I wasn't really paying so much attention to the band as the whole thing, because I had been in this crowd playing festivals and through the Horde tour and touring with Fish and Blues Traveling. So I knew the vibe, but now here you are with the guys on Mount Olympus, like, you know, and so I'm just taking in the whole thing. And as soon as Mickey went to drums and spaces start hitting the beams, a thunderstorm broke out. Thunder, lightning, just like torrential rain. And I was just, and the crowd goes and everybody's like hitting each other like, yeah, they did it again. You know, and I'm like, okay, that happened. And then I saw him, fortunately, Jerry was still alive and then it happened again at first night of Grateful Dead 50. Kreutzmann flew me out. And I hear the crowd going off, and me and Jess look up, and we're like, there's this huge rainbow. And I was like, you know, this is a real thing. Like, I don't know what it is, but, you know, you see the stickers, you know, they control the weather and all that. And I was just like, I don't know, man. I kind of think they are, you know, something's up. I don't.
They're magic.
It's crazy, man. Yeah.
Don, when did you start? When did your Grateful Dead relationship begin? Was it early on or later?
No, I saw him in Detroit at like the Easttown Ballroom, like maybe around like 1970 or something. That's you know,
Sweet.
Damn, Pigpen.
it was pretty wild, man. You know, and there was a different thing, and I was like a jazz fan at that point in my life, you know, and I understood what was going on. I thought, all right, they're just changing the beats and I didn't really understand modes at that point, but I understood that the basic principle underneath was similar, and I appreciated what they were doing. I dug it a lot, but that was the only time I saw him. I saw him then, and then you know, I'd known Bobby since the 90s, but really just socially, kind of. You know, we hadn't really played together much. They came to see me. Bobby and Mickey came to see me. Well, it was at Blue Notes. It was within the last 10 years. I'm not exactly sure when it was, but they wanted me to put out, you know, some of their solo stuff on Blue Note. And while they were in the office, John Mayer was working downstairs in Capitol Studio B. And I had already made 2 records with him, you know, in 2011 and 2012, I think. We made Born and Raised and Paradise Valley. And every time I got in the car with John, he had the Grateful Dead channel on Sirius, and that's all he listened to. I was shocked. I couldn't believe. So he was the one who really got me back into the music, because he explained the allure of it, at least enough so that I started paying attention to it. So when Bobby and Mickey came to my office, I called John. I said, man, whatever you're doing, come up here right now. And that's when he met him. And the plan was hatched for him to come up and jam at TRI. And Mike Gordon was there initially to play bass that day, and then I played one day, and that was getting reintroduced to that music, and certainly the first time I'd really played it. Played it badly, but played it.
What were the first ones that you learned, or was it just a jam?
I think I've got a version of us playing "He's Gone." which makes me cringe to listen to it. I can't really play it to listen to it because I played too much and I don't know what the fuck I was doing, but I didn't get it. And I knew I wasn't getting it. It was bad. I would have liked that gig. I mean, but I didn't. I wasn't worthy of it, man. I didn't. John. After that meeting, he stopped his record. He was making an album downstairs in Studio B, and he just shut it down, cleared all the stuff out of the studio, went home, and shedded Jerry for like 3-4 months. Because there was that kind of lead time before this. All right, in January, I will do it after New Year's, and we'll get together and play. And so when he walked in, man, he knew those songs, and he had started analyzing Jerry to the point where, like I said, you don't want to play karaoke, but you want to understand what he was doing so that you can find your way of doing it. So I thought he was awesome from the first moment. He got it. He gets it. I think it's always been part of him, and I think he does a wonderful job. It must be fun to play with him every night. He's a great musician.
Well, it takes time too. I mean, I think about like where he is now as opposed to when we started, and obviously the same for myself, because I don't know how you could get it. You just got to get in and you keep going, and you learn. It's just a gradual thing. It's like an osmosis, but like where he's at with it now, and Mayer, he's such a rabbit hole guy. So he'll go just on the technical end, like the amps, the guitars, the string, the pickups, all the, every effect, like he goes so deep on everything. And, but he's also going deep on the vocals, the guitar, also like the roots of everything. And I think that's one of the big things about the band is the roots are so, disparate, or just varied, myriad. It's probably the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. And, that's what makes it super fun, especially for a hyper intelligent guy like him, but that's why I say you cannot be bored. If you're bored doing this gig, you're just, I don't know, man. I don't see how. Like I was singing Gomorrah one time, which we don't even do with Dead and Company. It's a Jerry band tune, but I was doing it with my band, and I'm singing it. And one day I was like, oh, this is a country song. But I wouldn't have realized it if I wasn't singing it. Like if I was just playing it on bass, it would never have hit me. But the way when I was singing it, I was like, what is this? And I was all of a sudden, I'm just like thinking of George Jones or something. I was like, oh, this is a country tune. So it's coming from many different places at once, or this place or another place. And I love it. John he's the perfect type of mind and talent for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think he does a beautiful job, and it's really cool to watch. He was such an unlikely choice, and yet he was the perfect choice. And to see how he's endeared himself to long-term Dead fans it's beautiful, man.
I think it was meant to be because him and Weir have the same birthday.
And
Colonel Bruce called me. He goes, Bob has the same birthday as Mayer, and I was like, what? So I texted Mayer. I was like, you really have the same birthday as Bob? And I don't know if Mayer realized it. And he goes, October 16th. I was like, oh wow, Colonel Bruce was right. And he said, who's Colonel Bruce? But I always think like sometimes I think those things are meant to be, man, because it's when it's that unlikely. Mm-hmm. And then that's the thing. That's the proof. You're like, come on.
Yeah. It's like with Fare Thee Well and Trey, it was kind of like this thing where he was coming in, standing in the audience. You overhear old deadheads going, let's see what this kid's got. Like already kind of putting him behind the 8 ball. And then those same guys are crying their eyes out to Crazy Fingers in, 20 minutes. But it's that like, I'm kind of like rooting for my guy Trey. You know what I mean? And then when Mayer came in, it's kind of like, I remember being like, wait, who? like the guy waiting on the world to change guy, or like run through the halls of my high school. But like, I didn't give him the listen. I went back and listened to stuff that he did, with like his trio and stuff, and it's like phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And he's a Connecticut guy, and I grew up in Connecticut, so
There you
it
go.
was kind of neat to be, like. But he came in like unassuming, like he had no. Trey almost had like these inevitable shoes to fill. Do you know what I mean? Like that fish dead thing.
Yeah.
And that to me was kind of almost like I was nervous. I was like a kid. I was like a dad watching his kid play Little League. Like when Trey was out, I'm like, just pitch in the World Series and win us this game. But yeah, Mayer, I feel like came in a good position where he was kind of like, nowhere to go, but wherever he took it. So.
Yeah,
Pretty
thank
awesome.
you. Thank you for introducing.
Pleasure.
How was this past? How was the experience this past? Week. This holiday.
Man, it was wonderful. We had Jeff playing piano, and we had Greg Lease playing pedal steel, and I really liked that version of the band a lot. I think hopefully we'll do more as a quintet. When I first started, Bobby he wanted me to play like Jimmy Garrison. And we listened to, maybe it was Equinox, Africa, one of those songs where he's just playing low end, and he's holding down a thing while Elvin stretches, while McCoy's stretching out. And that's kind of, there's a real nice conversation between Bobby and Jay Lane that comes from playing together for 30 years or whatever they've been doing. And having the other two guys there playing, I didn't feel compelled to there was no place to go anyway, because it was full in that range. So I was able to stay down low, and I really tried to channel some combination of Jimmy Garrison and Willie Dixon. We started with New Speedway. This is the first time I realized, oh, it's Wang Dang Doodle. Okay.
Exactly.
I got this.
Exactly.
I never caught that before. It's funny, you mentioned, what was the song you said was a country song?
Gamora.
Yeah, Gamora. So I had having the pedal steel on there, I had the same realization on Touch of Grey, which is kind of a hard song to play because it's got, everyone's on those accents. There's a lot of accents in the thing. And if everybody plays the accents, then how does it groove along? I always found that problematic. Also, there are all these counter melodies, and a three-piece, especially when one of them's the drums, you can't cover all the lines, and you need all those little lines. So having Jeff knows all those little lines, and he and Greg locked in on them, and I realized, oh man, Touch It Grey is a country song. And just play it like a country. Don't worry about all those accents and everything. And it was the first time we had a groove under it. I was really, really pleased with that. There are new discoveries all the time. But I liked having less space, so I didn't have to go up as high. I can't do what you do, man. You're a virtuoso, man. I love your bass playing, and you blow my mind. I can't. I just don't know how to do that, but I can hold down low end. So,
well, it's a good thing because you'd be in big trouble if you did what I did.
Well, I think it's meant to be different. I look at these. I look at Wolf Brothers shows as being like an intimate night with Bob Weir, and it's really the first time you've been able to hear his guitar playing, without him weaving around somebody else, and you can really. He's a mind-blowing guitar player, man. There's nobody like him, and he's way better than I think people know he is, because he's always been in this the thing that he's so great at, which is he's a generous guitar player. He feeds everybody these great things to play off of, and he's really listening, and the musical conversation with him is captivating, man. It's wonderful to hear what he does. But he does the most unlikely stuff, man. He'll do some Segovia kind of lick, and then something so raw, John Lee Hooker like all in within 20 seconds. You know, it's a very entertaining conversation that he has going on the guitar. So you get to hear that really for the first time, I think, you know, without anything else playing in that range. But mainly I think of it as like a folk show. Like if there was a guy I used to play with, Peter, Paul, and Mary. I don't even know his name, but he was like the folk bass player, played string bass, and he didn't even stand. He stood off to the side a little bit, and he accompanied the folk singers. I think Judy Collins had somebody like that out with her, you know. So I think of that with Bob as like, this is different, man. Just stay out of his way. Give him room to phrase, because he'll phrase. Well, they're dramatically different every night, you know. Like so if you try to think, well, he's gonna finish the line here, so I'll answer here. Don't do that.
No. He'll change it just because you think that's where it's going to happen.
You know, the Ron Carter book, Finding the Right Notes or something like that. Is that what it's called? Well, you got it right there.
Oh, wow.
What's it? Searching for the right notes? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Finding the Right Notes.
Finding the Right Notes, yeah.
It was just given to me like a couple weeks ago.
I love that so much. In fact, he just had a post where he said on Instagram where he said the same thing. And that's it. Just like I'm asking myself, is it really necessary to play right here? What's actually okay? And then if you get deep into it, you just know that you can play one note and let it sustain for 2 bars, you know, till the next change, and maybe through the next change, and it gives him the room to phrase. But it's you can't do that in Dead and Company. It wouldn't have this. It doesn't have the sound. If you can't do that.
You can't do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I remember when his solo album came out, this last one, and then he was at Red Rocks, and I saw that group, and it was just super low volume, everything, and it was beautiful, man. Yeah. And I rarely get to watch stuff at Red Rocks and like get the cool experience, you know. Yeah. And I thought, oh, I get it, man. He just really goes to work, and that's where he has his superpowers. That's his power spot, you know. And I wish we could do that more, but you know, there's certain things, you know, in Dead and Company where it's gotta be the thing. Yeah, it's the thing, you know. So I'm really glad for him to get to do that, you know. Yeah. And I wish I didn't frustrate him quite so much. But you know, when you're working with bands that have been together a really long time, you're going to make one guy really happy and another guy really unhappy. It's not always the same spot. It's not continuous, but there's certain times where you like, I got to go this way, man. I'm sorry. And I'll be back. I'll be right back.
It's like when we had him on the podcast you know, we talked about, he mentioned how, you know, when he is singing each song, he becomes the character in the lyrics. And that, from a fan and from somebody who's, you know, woken up to those lyrics, fallen asleep to those lyrics, like, you know, it's been the soundtrack of everything. To hear him talk about that, and then think about like a Black-Throated Wind, where he's like the hitchhiker, or the, you know, and then you can see it perfectly mimics the way that he plays, where it's just, there's so much power in one, you know, because those, you know, your character isn't the same all the time, so how could your playing be? Yeah. So it's just it's so perfect and dead on for the style that he, you know, he plays with. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love listening to him, man. I love listening to him. I love being able to interact with him.
We love listening to you guys, man.
Well, it's very kind, man. Well, it's my favorite gig I ever had in my life. You know, that's for sure.
That's
hope we
awesome.
can keep doing it. Yeah.
That's really great to hear, man. That's really great to hear. Well, you do a fantastic job at it, man. I love your playing too. And I wish I had the upright child. I know Bob would love that, man. You know, but you do a great job, and I could tell you care. You know, and I could tell you get it. And you know, it's just it's a big thing to get. I wonder why it took me so long. You know, I guess.
To get around to that music?
Yeah, to get it. Like, you know, friends have been trying to turn me onto it since high school, but they never dosed me and took me to a show. So I can't be like, why didn't you guys just do that? You know? But I guess you just have to let some things come in their time, you know?
Yeah, you know, if you, like I said, but the task that you face, which is to hold up your end of the melodic conversation, but to hold down the low end the way you know how to do it, that's a super hard gig, and to find your own way of doing it so that you're truly engaged night after night after night. Maybe if you'd gotten in there earlier, you wouldn't have been able to approach the music with a beginner's mind, you know?
That's true. That's really true. And I know they would prefer it that way. You know, I hear Phil talk about that with all the different players he plays. Like, oh, no, don't play it like Jerry, you know? Mm-hmm. And Bob told me that, you know, he was like, you know, play it how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you're here. And then it's just a matter if you're brave enough to get naked, you know, and just reveal yourself and put it out there. And it's scary, man, when the fans decide they like you. It's a huge relief.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the only way you can really do it, is just like, you know, thank God there's so much there.
Did you meet resistance from diehard Phil fans when you started playing with Dead and Company?
No, I think everybody was so lined up on sides about Mayer that, you know, they're like, oh, he's that guy with the Allman Brothers. We like him, you know.
Two drummers, he'll be fine.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, that's true. You've been, even if you weren't in that band, you've been a part of that world. And, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of coming from the Aquarium Rescue Unit with Colonel Bruce, because Fish and Widespread Panic and Blues Traveler really were the ones that helped us be seen by anybody at all. And that's how I learned about the scene, but I hadn't been to a Dead show. But I knew all these people were Grateful Dead or Deadheads or whatever you want to call them. And yeah, so I was with the Allman Brothers for 17 years, and we had played with Phil. Phil and Bob had sat in with the Allman Brothers, and so I had met those cats. People kind of knew who I was already, but there was still, you know, there's still that thing. But I had also faced it coming into the Allman Brothers.
I'm sure.
You know, it was easier because Barry Oakley had passed away, and so had Lamar Williams, and it's a lot tougher if it's not the case. But you know, I felt a little more confidence just in my own identity with the audience, you know. And so, yeah, but what are you going to do? That's part of the fun in a way, you know, because it's like, oh, geez, that first night, man. Because I'm not just thinking about me. I'm thinking about Mayer, too. I mean, we knew it sounded good, and we felt like, okay. And I had some old school Deadheads, you know, like Rose Solomon had been around for, you know, like all these people. Yeah. And they came up to me in rehearsal, and they were like, that's what, you know. I was like, it doesn't sound right. They're like, whatever. Don't try to make it sound. It's about your energy. It's about your energy, you know? And that's just all your intention, right? That's why you work with it, because, you know, you have this thing for the music where you get it. And so if you want to make it work, then you're already on the right track. And the fans, that's what they could feel. I think that's why Mayer worked, because they could feel like, hey, this guy is on the bus, like for real. I don't know. And then it was beautiful to watch that whole thing where people are just like, no, never. And they're like, you don't know what you're missing. Why don't you open yourself up, man? Just like, it's so funny. It's still happening. I just love it.
Yeah.
Too funny. Man, one thing I always want to ask, the podcast, we kind of have a mental health, theme that we always like to touch on. And, for people that have been so many places and done so much, had past their wildest dreams come true, I'm always interested, not necessarily in the details of the bottom, but what was it that helped you get out of it? Like, what was your moment of grace, or what was your process, or, like...
Well, it's a complicated question. I mean, overall, if you live long enough, you discover that everything's cyclical, that the crest of the wave is equal to the trough. And in terms of a career in music, a career is not the right word, a life in music, there are going to be periods when you're on a roll where you're opened up and there's stuff coming in from the ether all the time, ideas, and there are going to be times when that's not happening. And it takes you, when you start with it not happening, and that's a fucking drag when when you can't pay rent and and then it happens, and then the first return to the trough is a shocker, and then after that you kind of know, all right, that's the way it is. If you want to experience something great, be prepared to experience some extreme lows, and then you just learn how to cope with extreme lows. It's not the end of the world, man. It's good things happen when can happen in that period, and knowing that it's going to come back. It always bounces back. It's physics, man. It's got to come back. It's all waves, and you're going to be all right. So what I do now, when the trough rears its ugly head, man, I just keep working. There was a period, around like 2009, 2010, where I was pretty sure I was done. Like my style of producing records, the kind of records I like to make, were not fashionable. They were not selling. I didn't think anything was selling. And I just thought I'd run out of steam, but I knew better. I knew that as long as I didn't die, there'd be it'd come back up again. So I just kept making records. If no one would hire me, I made records for free. I just didn't stop. I feel it's like sports a little bit. Tennis play. If you're going, you can't just come in and play Wimbledon if you haven't been practicing for the last 6 months or whatever. So I just kept my ears, in shape and in tune, and kept my chops up as a record producer. I made records for free for 2 years. Wow. Some good records, man. There's a cool Todd Snyder record, a couple of cool Chris Christopherson records. I just did them because I wanted to do them, and then it comes back. It's actually working with John Mayer. He called me out of nowhere to do Born and Raised, and he took a real flyer with me because I was definitely not. I was cold as fuck, but he wanted to get a certain thing, and we clicked, I think, personally right away. And he gave me a shot with that record. While I was in New York, we took one night off, and I checked the Village Voice, and I saw this guy, Gregory Porter, a singer who I had his first album. I saw that he was playing at a little jazz club called Smoke way up on the west side. So I went there that night, and it was just one of the greatest shows I ever saw in my life, man. I loved what he was doing.
It's amazing.
He's so good, man. I stayed all 3 sets. I wasn't there for business at all, man. I was just a fan. I sat there, drank coffee, ordered ribs. It was great. And the next morning, I was having breakfast with an old friend of mine, a guy named Dan McCarroll. And Dan, I knew him as a drummer, and he was married to my assistant from the 90s. That's really how I knew him. But he played with Sheryl Crow and Lloyd Cole and the Commotions, and he got involved in publishing. And at this point, he'd just become the president of Capitol Records. So we were just having breakfast. We weren't even talking about music for most of it. And at the end of the breakfast, I said, wait, is Blue Note Records still part of Capitol Records? Because if it is, you should really sign this guy that I saw last night, Gregory Porter. Well, unbeknownst to me, Bruce Lundvall, who'd run Blue Note Records so beautifully for over 30 years, he was ill, and he wasn't able to, had Parkinson's, and he had hit the point where he couldn't do the gig full time. And when I said that, he said, no, you should sign Gregory Porter. And he offered me the job right there over breakfast.
Wow.
And so that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been there with Mayer. I wouldn't have been there with Mayer if I hadn't kept my chops up by doing, records for free. And then something about, all of a sudden, John we had 2 number-1 records in a row, and I was the president of a record company. And before you know it, okay, I'm not down in the trough anymore. So the way you deal with it, the long answer to your question, is like you just never give up, and you just have to have this internal confidence that it comes back, that the lows are equal to the highs. No one experiences all lows. That would be flatlining, which means you're in the middle. But who wants to be in the middle, man? Flatlining is death. So the more interesting your life's going to be, the more you're going to have to deal with some unpleasantries too. But it's worth it.
That's incredible. And right now too, to hear that. 2021, which I'm calling season 2. COVID ain't over. It's season 2. Yeah. But we're, there's a lot of artists that are in that working man, blue collar, no hits to fall back on. There's no breaks to, I'll just take a year and record an acoustic. No, this is like, am I going to end up driving for Amazon, or am I still a comedian or a musician or an artist or whatever? So, to remind ourselves of that the highs and the lows happen, and, they both end, and, be prepared for both. That's serious advice for a time where we all need it. Thank you for sharing that, man. That's incredible.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. I hope people, it takes a while to know that. You got to be alive for a while. And I don't know, if I was young, I'm not sure I'd believe it, but I heard other people say, I'm sure I heard other people say. Yeah. But I remember in 2009, in that period where I wasn't getting much work, I read an interview with Rennie Davis, who was one of the Chicago 7 and had later gone off, and he was involved with like some Guru Maharaji or someone like, some kind of guru. And it wasn't political, but he was being interviewed somewhere, and he said, remember, your greatest asset is you. That no matter what happens, you still got you. There's something that everyone's got a strength, and if you play to your strength, you rise up. And that interview, just reading that, it really helped me so much, man. I thought, okay, stop worrying about shit. Stop worrying about how you're going to get through next month. Let's have a long range thing. Who are you, and what can you do? What do you have to offer? And let's play to that.
Yeah, I think I try to tell my students that, all my eggs were in one basket. I never went to college. I can't do anything else. This is it. So I figured at some point it's got to work out, or not. Either way, we're doing this, But the other thing I tell them is, that you got to give people something they can't get anywhere else. And there's only one thing, and that's you. Because you get everything else from somebody. There's Ron Carter out there, and there's there's a list of guys. Yep. But you can't even, if you can make yourself irreplaceable, or you can make yourself irreplaceable, even though everybody's replaceable, by really finding out what you are. And when you figure that 100%. Out, then you got a gem. A rare gem.
I agree, man. 1 year I worked on American Idol. They had producers on one season, and so they called me, and we'd work with the kids, and that was the big thing, is like, don't sing it like somebody else. Be your only chance of winning this thing. The only prayer you have is to be yourself and show why you're different from everybody else. Be the best version of you that you can be. I remember in the 90s, I was working, there's a period of time where I worked with a bunch of incredible songwriters, right? Like Brian Wilson and Christopherson and Willie Nelson and the Stones. And there was all like right in a row. And then for years after that, every time I sat down to write something, I'd sit down at a piano, and I wouldn't get 2 seconds in. I thought, like, what is the point, man? Like, you're never going to be as good as Brian Wilson. You're never going to be as succinct and emotional as Christopherson. I thought, well, you know something, man? Those guys are awesome. I can never be them. But they didn't grow up in Detroit in the 1960s and drop acid and go see the MC5 at the Grandy Ballroom. And, there's a unique set of roots that I have. So if I can be as true to that as possible, it's even okay not to, no one's going to be as good as Brian Wilson. Let's just be the best version of you. And there's a place for you. You're going to have something to do, and you're not going to starve. But that's the only shot you got. Brian Wilson was just being the best version of Brian Wilson. Yeah.
That's the best, man.
Thank you, man. This has been awesome. This is really great.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm so glad
you guys are very good. You make it very easy to converse.
I find it neat that you're telling that story, and it's, Mayer calls you up, and now you're both in that Grateful Dead family. You know what I mean? Like, that's the part to me. Like, that's the happy ending at the end of the tale, is that both brothers on the bus.
It's wild how things work out, man.
Yeah, one day we got to do that idea I was talking about. I want to get together with you and just like go through the tunes that we play in common.
Let's do it.
And have the three-way, the triangulation, like Phil, you, me, and I think it's fascinating. He's one of the most fascinating bass players ever, and thank God he set that template the way he did, because it allows you to just be like whatever you are. He's like, never do it the same way once. I mean, like, what more freedom? What more freedom could you be given?
Have you had him on the show? On your podcast?
No,
let's do that. It'd be good. We can do a Q&A. We can ask him questions about the songs and what he was doing on them. I would love to do that, man.
Yeah, that'd be super cool, man. And Lost Sailor, he does some stuff in there. He plays the tritones, or the fifth. It moves in a tritone, I think, and he plays the fifth instead of the one. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, to get it in my head, I just kept shifting back and forth, and it sounded like Iron Man by Black Sabbath. I was like, yeah, it's like, this is gothic as hell. Just like, wow. And Phil just, of course, he's just trying. I was like, man, thank God. It's just... But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's just great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was really good to see you. Pleasure to see you, Mike. Take care.
Absolutely, man. Happy New Year, and thank you for the music.
Yeah, good to be here. Take care.
Peace, brother.
Peace.